Good evening. I'm just waiting for our speaker to join us. We're still waiting for our speaker to join us, so please just give us the next couple of minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Hi there, Layla. You gave me a bit
Hi,
of a fright.
Martin.
Yes.
I'm very sorry about that.
Uh,
I don't know what happened. My camera was having a bit of problems, and then my microphone wasn't working, so I needed to sort that first. So my sincere apologies for being slightly delayed. Thank you all for joining, and I look forward to being your sessions. So let me just share my screen. Sometimes technology is not working the way that you want it to work, you know? Right, let's. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay,
that's just coming
can you
up
see?
now.
Can you see the screen?
There you go. You can see it now. Yes, it's fine.
Wonderful. Okay, right. Thank you all for joining this session. So today I'm going to be talking about qualitative data analysis. My name is Layla Mohammed, and I will introduce myself. So my name is Layla Mohammed. I'm currently an assistant professor and director of research at the American University of Bahrain. I'm also honorary fellow at the University of Manchester in the UK. I received my PhD from the University of Manchester in 2021. And my PhD is in science, technology, and innovation policy, looking specifically at the adoption of electric vehicles. So my interests lie in consumer behavior, technology adoption, sustainability, and more specifically, transportation research. And so, over my bachelor, my master's, and my PhD, I've been quite fortunate enough to gain skills in actually doing research in both quantitative and qualitative. So today I'm going to be sharing you some knowledge and understanding on qualitative data analysis. Please feel free to stop me if you have any questions, and just ask any questions as we go along. Okay. So, today, by the end of this session, you'll be able to define what is qualitative data analysis. You'll also be able to define and acknowledge what are the 6 steps required for to analyze data qualitatively. And then we'll look at how to start to code and categorize qualitative data. And what does that actually mean? So, what is meant by qualitative data analysis? Lacey and Luff in 2009, they say that qualitative data analysis is actually a process by which we move from the raw data that we collected, and then we try to make sense of this data for our research. So to be able to provide some explanations and understanding and interpretation of the particular phenomenon that we are researching. So we're trying to understand something, and we're trying to interfere. What is the meaning of that? And that could be the study of people or the study of the situation that we're looking at. So I think the key takeaway here to understand is that qualitative data analysis is certainly a process, and it does take time, and it is quite time consuming, and I will show you why throughout this session. So why would qualitative data analysis be particularly good for some research more than others? If you are researching a particular experience of perhaps a situation or people, then qualitative research would be very fitting for your research. Also, if you're trying to understand perceptions, opinions, attitudes, feelings, maybe particular knowledge of something, qualitative research is particularly good if you want to understand a phenomenon in a very deep detail. Okay, so it's not to say that qualitative is only fitting for understanding, experience, opinions, and feelings and knowledge. Is this that it's the most fitting methodology if you are researching these kind of contexts? Okay. Now, with that said, of course, you can examine opinions, attitudes, experiences in a quantitative way, in a numerical way. However, it may not give you depth of that particular phenomenon that you're trying to understand. It will give you very surface level information. Okay, so when you want to understand something in more depth, qualitative research is particularly good. It's very good for consumer behavior studies. So just to sort of sum up here, what kind of techniques would we use qualitative data for? Well, we would be looking at techniques such as interviews, semi-structured interviews or structured interviews. Does anyone know the difference between structured, semi-structured, and unstructured interviews? Feel free to speak or write in the chat.
Yeah, when you have a structured interview means you book the person. For example, Viva was, you have an interview. It is structured. The
Okay, good.
speaker and the candidate know what to exchange. Whereas
Yes.
unstructured, based on the situation, you start asking.
Good.
Whereas
Okay.
semi-structured, this is equally like structured, but the time limit is confined to the situation. Thank you.
Good. Anyone? Excellent. Well done. Thank you, Emmanuel.
I can give it a try here. So structured interviews, as I understand, are basically, I would say, standardized way of taking wherein every participant is asked almost the same set of questions in the same order. While in the semi-structured way, it is a flexible kind of a format that helps to come prepared with like questions with the freedom to explore topics in more depth. So probably you can play with the order of your questions.
Good. Excellent. Good. You all touched on some excellent things there. So structured, as you said, you're going to have an interview guide and you're not going to really deviate from that interview guide. Okay. You come in, you got a plan, you got questions, and you need these questions to be answered. Semi-structured, you have an interview guide. However, if new things emerge or the conversation diverges to a different way, you're open to it. This is new, you're open to new data collection, something that maybe this is called an inductive approach. Inductive approach meaning you're letting the data emerge organically, naturally. A deductive approach, which would be a structured interview, which means you're coming in with a set of questions, perhaps derived from theory or perhaps another paper, and that you are wanting to ask these questions. Unstructured, maybe you don't even go in with an interview guide. You might just have one or two things that you needing to get answered, but other than that, you're letting the conversation flow naturally. Excellent. So interviews is one way, focus groups is another way. Focus groups tends to be used a lot when, for example, in product launches, when you want to understand if a prototype is particularly good, a prototype of a toy maybe or a product, you want to understand what's the experience of the consumer, perhaps a focus group. It also happens in universities. We do this quite a lot in universities. If we want to understand how effective a particular program was, we recently want to review our MBA program. It's coming up for the 5-year review. So what did we do? We took some alumni, MBA alumni, current MBA students, and we had a focus group and we asked them, what was your positives, what were your negatives, what would you change, what would you improve about your experience in the university. So focus groups is good. Telephone interviews you have. These tends to be the main types of qualitative approaches, but then there's also observations. You have observations, which is a form of qualitative, where, for example, if you want to understand shopping behavior, again, notice it's mainly about behavior, human behavior, right? So if you want to understand shopping patterns, you may sit and observe maybe just males or females or children of a certain age and see how long they may spend in a shop or so on. Observations also happen in universities for teaching observations. I did a PGCE in further education, and observations is something that we have a lot. I had to do that as part of my own research. I had to observe, and the observations was the methodology, and I would have to write my analysis on the observations. So these are all different types of research. Also, you have to note that these are primary data collection techniques for qualitative. You also got secondary qualitative. Secondary qualitative data analysis would include analysis of papers, for example. So a good example of that would be systematic literature reviews. Have you come across a systematic literature review before? Does anyone know what it is? Yeah, Emmanuel got the thumbs up there. Okay, excellent. Would you like to explain, Emmanuel?
I mean, systematic literature review is how the gap you find for which you are researching, you would be trying to find the sources from the literature review. For example, I want to find out the problems based on my objectives and problem statement, the gaps that I can identify from various sources from the existing literature. That is what I feel.
Okay, yeah, you're definitely
Yes.
touching upon
Yes.
some things there. Very good. So, a systematic literature review paper, technically they have their own methodology. Some follow a systematic literature review methodology, some for a snowballing type of methodology. Anyhow, they're all forms of secondary qualitative research. And why are they secondary qualitative research? Because you're collecting a large number of papers and then you're summarizing the main themes that you find out of these papers. So, for example, I did a systematic literature review paper, and since my area is kind of niche, I was only able to analyze 53 academic papers. Now, from these 53 academic papers, I had to highlight what are the main findings, what are the main opportunities, what are the main challenges of all of these authors and all of these findings of this research. And so that is a systematic literature review. When you're condensing a large amount of papers, usually more than 50 actually, it's usually more like 100, 150, maybe even more. But since my area is quite small, I did 53. And so you're consolidating all of these papers and you're highlighting the main themes in relation to the gap that you are talking about. Okay, so what are the advantages of qualitative research? Overall, the qualitative advantages would be that you go into depth about a particular phenomenon. You can really understand why the why in your research. Okay, but what would be the main limitation of qualitative research? The main limitation would be is that it's based on a small sample size, usually, and we will talk about sample size in a minute. But usually, as a general note, the limitation would be perhaps the sample size. You're not able to generalize your results. And so, as we mentioned, what kind of questions is qualitative research suitable for? It's suitable for understanding behavior, some experience, opinions, attitudes, emotions. I've seen a lot analyzed by qualitative data. So, with that said, of course, when it comes to qualitative data, then we should use an appropriate sample size. And you may know already that there's broadly speaking, there's two types of sampling. We've got probability and non-probability. Probability is mainly for quantitative, numerical research, okay? Random sampling and so on. If we're doing qualitative research, we should ideally align our sampling technique in line with the overall methodology and we're doing. So here is just some, okay? And I will just touch base on some of these. For example, in qualitative research, we use quite a lot snowballing or convenience sampling. Snowballing, what is snowballing sample type? Basically, for example, if I'm doing electric vehicle research, in my case, it might be quite relevant. There is a lack of people. I find it very hard to find people who actually bought an electric vehicle. Finding, at least in the Middle East, in the UK, maybe not so much. You're starting to pick up the adoption, okay? But in the Middle East, it's still very few and far between. So if I want to understand the adoption of electric people, those who actually bought an electric vehicle, why did they buy an electric vehicle? I want to understand the factors, what made them buy an electric vehicle. And they have to actually buy it. That means my sample group would have to be actual consumers. How would I go about that? Perhaps I do know one or two people. So I would go to this person or these two people and I'd say, you know, can you participate? And they've participated in my research. And then at the end, I would say, do you know anyone else who has bought an electric vehicle who's be willing to participate in my study? I'm hoping that they would say yes, because they're all in the same community. People usually know people. So that's snowballing, right? Because you're going from one person to the next person and they are recommending them. Convenient sampling, perhaps you just, you know, it's just convenient at that particular time. They happen to be available. They happen to fit the requirements of your research. And so you've just picked them. It's not based on gender. It's not based on age. It's not based on anything else. Okay. So when you're doing qualitative, you should also bear in mind that everything that you're doing, and the same applies to quantitative, everything that you do, everything that you select in terms of your methodology should align with the overall arching method. Okay, that goes with the sampling technique, that goes for the philosophy, the research approach, the data analysis, and so on. So always bear that in mind. But the main question I usually get from my students is, when do I know when to stop in qualitative data? Well, you have to reach data saturation, okay? And what is data saturation? Basically, it is when no new information or insights are discovered from the data that you've collected and the process is deemed complete. Now, you will naturally feel this when you are doing your interviews, but also more likely when you've actually done the transcription and you started to code one by one. In my own experience, for example, when I started to collect data, even in the interviews, I feel it click. Okay, you will start anticipating their answers in a way because they start to become the same or similar. This is good. This means is that your data collection is complete because you're starting to say, okay, most of my participants pretty much said the same thing. 8 out of 10 people all said that they had positive attitudes towards buying an electric vehicle, and therefore attitudes is a main finding, a main theme in this research. Yeah, or they all say 8 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 people, or 10 out of 10 people, the majority said that driving range of an electric vehicle hindered their adoption of electric vehicles. It made them think twice. Yeah, so data saturation is basically when the majority of your participants are saying the similar things to all your questions. Okay. And what are the indicators? So here we have repeated themes or repeated patterns. You will feel this naturally in your interviews. There's no new codes or categories emerging. When you start to transcribe your research, your transcripts, you will feel this naturally. You'll say, oh, I remember participant A said a similar thing, and B and C and D and E. Yeah, so you can start to categorize them as all one thing. The majority are saying the same thing. Researchers can predict participant responses accurately, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. You can start to anticipate their answers. You get a feel for the findings of your interviews. So, why do we do this? Why is it important to reach data saturation? It's important because it ensures thorough explanation of the research questions. At the end of the day, our task as researchers, right, is to answer our main overarching research question. Now, if the majority, if only, for example, I've interviewed 10 people, but only three, let's say, sorry, we've interviewed 10 people, but those 10 people all saying different things. This means you have no findings. You got nothing to report, no conclusive findings. We need to be able to efficiently answer our research questions, and in doing so, we need the majority of our participants to say similar things. If they are saying similar things, this ensures research validity and reliability. Okay, we are more confident in our answers. And it prevents unnecessary data collection. So once you got the majority saying similar things, and when I say majority, we need at least, between 7, if you're doing 10, 7 to 10, 8 to 10, 9 to 10, 10 to 10, we would prefer this. The majority need to agree. Now, with that said, what does the research say that is sufficient for qualitative data? I've seen papers pretty much say it depends, of course. It depends on what your population size is, okay? What you're studying. There is papers, you can find this, okay? But you need to, it does depend on what you're studying, what is the phenomenon, what is the context, which geographical location are we basing it on, what is it that you're actually researching. But papers say that between 6 to 12 should be sufficient depending on data saturation, okay? But like I said, it does depend, and this is something you would need to speak to with your supervisor. But that is the general note, yeah. Okay, so if you ever write your thesis, your research project, or if you have presentations, just always it's a very common question, by the way, and it has to be in the writing. But if you do have a Viva or anything like that, a common question from your professors would be, how do you know that you've collected enough research? You collected data until you reach data saturation. Okay, that's all you need to say. And then you need to know what that actually is. So, moving on, we have different types of qualitative data analysis. And there's three main types, I would say, that we use in qualitative data. We've got grounded theory, thematic analysis, and content analysis. Thematic analysis tends to be the most common analysis type, so most likely you will use this one. However, again, it does depend on what it is that you're researching, what is the research goals and objectives and aims. Okay, grounded theory. Grounded theory is particularly good if you want to develop new theory or concepts directly from qualitative data. So it uses an inductive approach, inductive meaning you are open to new findings, new knowledge, you're letting the data emerge organically. Thematic analysis, you can actually use inductive and deductive, but thematic analysis, which is the one I'm going to explain and dive in deeper today because it is the most common type of data analysis. This one involves identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns, which is also known as themes, within qualitative data. It's very flexible and widely used method to generate themes and insights from textual and or visual data. Content analysis is also particularly good. This is more suited if you are doing secondary data analysis. So like I said, the systematic literature reviews, or if you're doing policy paper analysis, policy document analysis, or just document analysis, for example, content analysis you will see always widely used. But it's also very good for understanding textual, visual, or audio materials, okay, to identify, similar to thematic, but it's more for visual and audio materials mainly. So identifying patterns, themes, and meanings within content. So for example, I actually recently had a bachelor student. She wanted to understand how sharks are advertised in a very aggressive, negative way, and she believes in her experience that actually sharks are not aggressive by nature. It's just that if you aggravate them, they are aggressive. But they are, she was a marketing student, so in a marketing context, they are marketed as very, very aggressive animals, vicious, killers. And she didn't understand why. So anyway, she did content analysis. She collected all these visuals, adverts and everything. And she did her analysis. But yeah, she did content analysis. So as you can see, it's often used to analyze documents, media, or any form of communication. I also use content analysis for the systematic literature review paper because we're trying to analyze text, okay? Text, secondary sources of text, and understand the patterns and themes and meanings of all of these 50 papers, for example. Right, so diving deeper then in thematic analysis, we can see that thematic analysis tends to be about understanding the main patterns that emerge from the raw data and trying to make sense of these through themes. And in doing so, we're trying to make meanings out of the data that we've collected. Now, Bruin and Clark, very famous reference here for thematic analysis, they say to apply thematic analysis well, there is 6 steps, okay? And these are the 6 steps. They're very straightforward, but I must say that it's a very iterative process, okay? They're very straightforward, but you go back and forth with them. So step 1, you familiarize yourself with the data, and I will go through these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but just as an overview, familiarize yourself with the data, generate the initial codes, then try to see how we can collect all of these codes, so similar, they're saying similar things, and categorize it into one main theme. So what word can we use that provides meaning to all of the codes? And then we will look at the main findings, which is known as themes, and we will say, okay, is this actually the most appropriate word? Can we can we think of a more fitting words that may be able to contextualize or make meaning of this raw data? Okay, so that's where we start to review themes. Is this word the most appropriate? Then we define and rename, because there will be a lot of back and forth, and then you do your write-up. I think it's important to note that there is technically 2 types of approaches when you're doing thematic analysis. So you've got the inductive and deductive approach. So an inductive approach, which allows you're allowing the data to determine the themes. Okay. Yeah, you're letting the data to emerge naturally. You're not coming with preconceived findings. Sometimes, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, we may be fishing for certain findings. Okay, if you are doing that, if you are coming to the interviews and you are anticipating particular results, this is a deductive approach. Okay, so if we see here, we can say preconceived themes. So think about it. There's something that you would need to write in your report because it could potentially come up as either feedback or questions. If you have a presentation, they may ask, so which approach did you adopt and why? And also, they may even ask you about the process of your data collection and how did you write your interview guide? How did you collect the data? How did you analyze the data? Whether they ask you directly or indirectly about the approach, as in deductive or inductive, even if they don't ask you directly, they could ask you through the steps that you've taken. Okay, so there's something to bear in mind. So, what is then coding and categorizing and themes? It gets a bit overwhelming sometimes because we have a lot of words that are similar in meaning. So, just to clarify, a code is a label or tag that is assigned to a specific portion of text, usually very short portion of text. Okay, it could be a few words, it could be maybe a sentence at best. I will show you an example in a minute, but it's very specific text. We should not see, if your supervisor asked, oh, can I see the process that you went through? I want to see your coding, your categorizing, your themes. I want to understand. They shouldn't see a large portion of text code. Yeah, this is not how it should be done. It should have little bits should be coded.
A quick question, Doctor.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding inductive research, uh, the challenge would be one of the challenge would be the researcher bias. So researchers may interpret data based on their own experiences, their own
Yes.
assumptions or expectations. So
Yes.
what is the possible solution here to avoid this?
Unfortunately, in all research, there could be elements of researcher bias. And I will talk about that in a moment. And it's fantastic that you bring that up because we're humans and we are analyzing the research. There will always be, to some degree, potentially, whether we do it knowingly or unknowingly, researcher bias. Okay. How do we come over that? There is different ways. The main way is triangulation. I think I've got it in here in this PowerPoint slide. Triangulation is where we try to reduce any bias in our findings. So one of the main limitations as well of qualitative research is not only has it got a small sample size, another main limitation, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, is that it's very subjective in nature, right? It's very subjective, qualitative, whereas quantitative is more objective. The numbers say what the numbers say. With qualitative, you have to infer what is the main findings of this raw data. So there could be there's always a lot of subjectivity when it comes to qualitative research. And I always say, some faculty, some students say, oh, qualitative is easier than quantitative, or quantitative is easier than qualitative. Actually, I find I've done both. I've been fortunate to be experienced in both. And they both got their advantages and disadvantages. Actually, I find them both equally hard. What I found hard about qualitative is that to a certain degree, you've got to be quite a good writer to be able to persuade your readers that the findings that you find is the findings. Okay. Now, like you said, researcher bias. Yes, this can definitely come in and most likely will come into your research and be a problem. But how do we try to eliminate that? One way is triangulation. What is triangulation? We ask 2 or 3 people that are related to your research, know your research quite well. It could be your supervisor, it could be another colleague, maybe both. and you say, okay, this is my raw data, this is my process. Okay, I did this, I did this, I did this, I coded like this, and then I categorized these codes into these themes, and my reasoning behind this is X, Y, and Z. Okay, you will give them all of your process and all of your data. And you ask them, would you code it like this? Would you name this theme, or would you change it? So what we're doing is triangulation, okay? You're asking this person, and you're asking this person, and you're asking this person, because what I find as a finding may not be what you find as a finding. Yeah. So this is what we do. We do triangulation. I ask my supervisor or my co-author, I ask my other co-author, and I'm hoping that if we can all come to an agreement, and I explain my process, that it makes sense and that they would name the theme either the same as me or something similar. Or maybe they say maybe it's not appropriate, maybe we can find a better word for it. So this is how we try to eliminate researcher bias. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for the detailed explanation, Doctor. I think it makes sense. I think what you're referring to is as a researcher, one must practice reflexivity, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. So what are codes? Codes are used to identify and highlight meaningful elements, themes, or patterns within qualitative data, and I'm going to show you in a moment. And then once we've coded our transcripts, we start to categorize these. So condense all of these codes into one word, and it should be one short word, ideally one word. It should not be a sentence of words. One word, ideally, that can conceptualize all of these codes into one main word and really condense and summarize your coding. So categorization here, codes are used to categorize or classify segments of data based on their content or significance. And so we do this to make it more manageable for the analysis, because imagine you've done 10, 20 interviews, each one lasts 45 minutes. That is a lot of text that you're writing. And because of that, you're going to end up with potentially hundreds or thousands of codes. And then we got to condense these thousands or hundreds of thousands of codes into more words that can consolidate these large amount of texts. Okay, and so overall, we're trying to make meaning of our research. And a little bit more here. Why are we coding and categorizing? It's for data organization, so to hopefully make sense of large volumes of qualitative data analysis. We are able to then identify patterns and themes and trends within the data. We are reducing our data to a more manageable unit of analysis, because at the end, when we write our data analysis, we identify our theme, right? And when we are motivating our theme, as in we are trying to persuade the reader that the theme that we find is our theme, we need to show snippets from the raw data. Okay, so we take snippets to provide evidence of why this theme exists. So you'd say participant 1 stated that quote. Okay, and when you put quotes in, it should be like one short sentence. It should not be, unless there's something extremely valuable in that large quote. So sometimes you may need to use a large quote, but it should be used sparingly. Then we are trying to make interpretations of our data, make meaningful insights, and, like I just said, evidence-based findings. So then we will use our snippets from our transcripts and use this to support our theme. And so why do we do all of this? Why are we going through this whole process? And you should, by the way, document your process. You should keep track of your process as you go along and you're doing your data analysis. Actually, we recently I had some students, and we asked them, how did you do the qualitative data analysis? And I was expecting, they had 12 transcripts, and for each transcript it was maybe at least, I don't know, 15, 20 pages. It was a lot. And one of the assessments was to analyze. I've given you a question, analyze these 12 transcripts and present the themes of what they think they did, what they think they found. And so I asked them about their process and the data collection, and do you have any evidence of the process? And two students, they just showed me this piece of paper. It was one A4 piece of paper, and they just had this very simple table, maybe like 4 or 5 themes with 3 or 4 bullet points each. And it just wasn't sufficient enough to show me that you've sat down, really analyzed these transcripts, really went into detail as a team and discussed why you think what you think. Yeah, they wasn't able to defend their themes very well. So you really need to keep track of all your research and the process, your analyzing, your coding, your categorizing. I really understand that process in which you're going in, because your supervisor or your examiners, they will ask you these questions to make sure that you fully understood how to really do qualitative data analysis. So qualitative data analysis, why, for example, triangulation, why are we doing that? Why are we making sure that the document, that you keep a trail of your document analysis, is to be able to have reproducibility. So others can produce your analysis, they can look at your analysis. It improves the study's transparency. So if you're looking to publish your work, most likely the publisher will ask in an appendix, can we have the process, the raw data, the steps that you did? So it's very important to keep track. It may not be in the main thesis, okay, or research that you're doing, but you need to keep it in the appendix and as supplementary material, because this is where it provides enhanced credibility and enhanced rigor, okay? It really provides validity and reliability of your findings. Now, if you are using particularly a deductive approach, but even an inductive approach, it could help. So the theory, the underpinning theory that you use could also help in terms of the main findings that you're finding. For example, if you are understanding why people adopt cryptocurrency, let's say, what factors influence the adoption of cryptocurrency? Now, if that was my study, my underpinning theory, and you should always have an underpinning theory, no matter what research you're doing, okay? It provides the foundations of your work. The underpinning theory in this case is what? It's technology adoption, okay? Now, when we look at technology adoption theory, there's loads. There's so many great technology adoption theories. So you need to look at which one is most appropriate for you. You can have a whole session on how to choose the appropriate theory, but nonetheless, we choose a technology adoption theory, and that technology adoption theory, right, helps you to frame your research questions in your interview guide or your questionnaire. It doesn't matter whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative. It can help you. It helps you to keep a structure of your research questions. It helps you to understand what potentially could be your findings. All right. Now, that's why I say here, the theory you choose can determine the results that you find. Yeah. For example, if I'm doing technology acceptance model talks about how perceived usefulness is particularly important when adopting a new technology. If I use that theory, it's very likely, if I frame my questions for my interview guide according to that theory, it's likely that I'm going to have, of course, findings in relation to that theory. So theory can be particularly good to give you structure, okay? and you're testing theory. So it's not grounded theory because you're not coming up with new theory, you're testing theory. All right. So I tend to like using theory and using that to structure my interview questions, and it gives me structure in terms of my findings and so on. So think about it in terms of your theory and how it can structure your paper. Okay, so just to go over the 6 steps a little bit more closely, what do I need to do once I've finished my data collection? So let's imagine you've just done your 10 interviews and now you are quite overwhelmed because you've got all this data. Your first step is to transcribe the data. I would say you need to do your best in transcribing it very closely, word for word. I'm a bit old school, and I don't know why, but I love doing it myself. And it's because when I'm doing it myself, I'm already analyzing. Um, I'm already 10 steps ahead. So when I'm transcribing, I can already see the analysis. I already know what my findings are because I've listened to the transcript so much. But of course, we've got AI now, so maybe it's maybe not the best of tips. But it is 2-in-1. If you transcribe, you can understand the analysis much better. But with that said, of course, if you're transcribing using software, try to make sure that the transcription is extremely close to the actual audio. If you can, try to transcribe even the mini pauses that it has in the transcription, even when they're thinking. So, for example, when you ask them a question and they take time, you can put dot, 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 that they're taking a time to answer, they're thinking. And they might even start off like, even the body language and, when they're not sure about something. Ideally, it should be transcribed because it shows hesitation or struggling to answer the question. So here I put consider even non-verbal expressions in your transcript is equally as important to put it in there. Be patient because it's actually very time consuming. Even if we're using AI to transcribe, you should make sure that the transcription is a true and fair reflection of the transcription of the audio, sorry. So step 1, once you've done all of that, you've got your data, you've got your transcripts, maybe you used AI to transcribe them. What do I need to do? You need to read the transcripts, most likely way more than once. You will keep going back to the transcripts, and every time you read that one transcript, I guarantee you will find new things that you did not see before. Yeah, you remember you're reading a lot and your brain sometimes is not always registering something. I'm sure you've read books in the past and every time you've read it, you're like, oh, that's new. It's the same here. Whenever you read the transcript, new things is going to emerge. Yeah, so read it very carefully, line by line, take your time. Get to know your data. This is step 1. Remember, step 1, familiarize yourself with the data. Know your data, spend time with the data. Make notes of your first impressions. This is called codes. Yeah, so this is how we start to code our data. What is codes? Is anything that comes to your mind, anything at all. Yeah, it could be, for example, a previous paper that you read. It could be a theory that you've read. It could be something completely not related to your research, but you see the link. Put it down. Anything that comes to your mind, you put it down. And here again, I say, codes can be about activities, concepts, difference of opinions, whatever you think is relevant when you're reading. You may decide something is relevant because it's repeated several times. Maybe because it surprises you. Maybe because the interviewee explicitly stated that it's important. Or maybe you read something in the literature, and like I said, maybe you read it in another paper. Or it reminds you of a theory or concept, okay? So this is how you code. This is your initial first impressions. And when it comes to coding, be generous in terms of how many codes that you give. Any small portion of text can be coded. Don't be surprised if you have hundreds and hundreds of codes. This is normal. This is good, actually. You should be very open-minded when you code. It's important to note that this is your study, and how you code and how you are, when it comes to your main findings, this is your choice and how you tell the story. It is subjective, but that's the nature of qualitative, okay? As long as you try to reduce researcher bias through triangulation and so on, then it's fine. You're telling a story, you're telling a narrative, okay? Your job is to find that narrative and to write it. Yeah, just make sure you tell the reader about the methodology and the choices that you make. You justify. Everything that you do in terms of your methodology and your coding process needs to be thoroughly explained and justified with literature, okay? Or some sort of clear explanation as to what you've done and why you've done it. So just always think, have I explained this enough? Is it clearly explained? Is it referenced? Is it justified? Can I link it to any methodological literature to enhance the credibility? If you can, this will enhance the overall credibility of your research. Remember, try to be unbiased, stay close to the data, okay? Yes, it is subjective. Yes, you are inferring meaning, but at the end of the day, you do need to stay very close to the raw data. Don't limit yourself to just a few codes. This could be hundreds. Now let's take an example here. Okay, we have an example here, for example. All right, this is we are researching perceptions of climate change among conservative voters aged 50 and up. And we have collected data through a series of interviews and an extract, one of the extracts. This is a very small extract from a transcript. Very small. Look how small this is, okay? It's barely a paragraph. Please take a moment to read that. Okay, so we can see here, okay, that in this very short snippet of this interview of this transcript, sorry, we can see how many codes have come out of this. A minimum of 4 codes. You might even think of 4, but we got a minimum of 4 codes. Okay, and this can be categorized or coded as the following. So here we got, I'm not sure. This is showing emotion, hesitant. Yeah, I don't know why or how. Uncertainty. So this is being coded as 2 things here. We've got as uncertainty. We got the climate is changing, so acknowledgement of climate change. We got who's to say they don't have their own reasons for pushing the narrative. Clearly very skeptical. I'm just saying there's no reason, there's reason not to 100% trust them. Clearly a trust issue here then of experts. And then we got, it used to be called global warming. So that's changing terminology. All right. Now, this is just a first draft. Imagine you're going to code and recode and then categorize. Every time you are reading your transcript, you will see new things. You might code it differently, you might add, you might edit, and so on. But this is just to give you a very short understanding, very brief understanding, and look at how short the snippet is and how many codes can come out of it. So once you've got your codes here, okay, we start to categorize. Categorization and themes essentially is the same thing, okay? They love to change the terminology, but it's basically the same. You're going to categorize your codes, or you're going to now name your themes through your codes. And it's generally broad, it's a terminology that is broader than the codes. So you decide which codes are the most important, and then we start to categorize them. Bring in several codes together. Keep the codes you think are important and group them together in the way that you want. In fact, many of the initial codes that you've originally generated will now be dropped, okay? Because what we're trying to do here is make our data more manageable. So then, as you can see here, this is a great example of how we then turn our codes into themes or categories. So we have 3 here, which was classified as uncertainty before. Okay, so this would be uncertainty now. So leave it to the experts, alternative explanation, uncertainty. Then this is named, the main finding here, uncertainty. Okay, I think it's important to note here that even though you use the word for the code, it can also be used as the theme, okay? So don't be afraid that you've got repetition. It's fine. If you feel uncertainty, the word uncertainty is the most appropriate to sum up all of these codes, then so be it. We will use uncertainty, okay? But note here that we should only really be using, one word to sum up the theme. It should not really distrust of experts, or it could be even shortened to distrust, But distrust of experts, fine. It's not too long. But try to keep this short and sweet. We've got another theme here, misinformation. So incorrect facts, misunderstanding of science, biased media sources. For distrust of experts, we've got changing terminology, distrust of scientists, fear of government control. All right, so you can start to see how we are condensing all of these codes into one main word, which is your theme. And so by doing so, you are now creating the findings of your study at abstract level. First you zoom in, you get all your codes, and now we are zooming out, okay, an abstract level. So you are conceptualizing your data, which is your themes. And so step 4, you now need to look at your themes again, review your themes again, okay, and make sure, are your themes useful? Are they accurate? Are they an accurate representation of the codes? Yeah. Here we are returning back to the data set, and we're comparing our themes against one another. We're comparing our themes against the original quotations, the original raw data. Okay, always go back to the raw data. Make sure that it's a true and fair reflection, because you don't want to come to the write-up, you put a theme and then you use a transcript as evidence of your theme, but it doesn't make sense, okay, or it's not aligning. So you need to keep on refining your theme, potentially. If we encounter problems with our themes, we might split them or combine them, or disregard them completely and create new ones. Don't be afraid to completely remove some, add some, edit some. This is the normal process, okay? You have to go back to your research questions that you got at the beginning. Does my findings make sense? Does my findings answer my main research question? Yeah, go back. Are you actually answering? One of the main issues that students have in research is that they've done all this data collection, they've done the analysis, but actually they didn't answer their research question fully. Okay, so go back, answer your research question. Are we fully answering the question? Is it helpful? Is our findings helpful or not? Yeah, defining themes involves formulating exactly what we mean by each theme. You need to be able to fully understand and explain why your theme is important. And you'll do that through using evidence of your snippets. Yeah. So always making sure that your themes and your evidence line up and of course relate back to your research questions. Naming themes involves coming up with succinct and easily understanding name for each theme. Always simplify, okay? Always simplify your research. And I would say the same when it comes to your overall writing. Some of the most beautiful papers are the simple papers, okay? And if you have time, I will tell you a whole story about that. But one time in my PhD, I had an idea of a paper. And I went to a professor because I had to learn stata, yeah? I had to learn very advanced econometrics because COVID happened. Anyhow, I had this great idea, great paper. I had a research gap and everything, and it's very solid, but it was very simple. And I realized that no one had done it in my research area. So anyway, I went to this professor who was helping me learn econometrics, and I said to her, I've got this great idea. And she was like, Layla, it's too simple, it won't be published. Fast forward a couple of months after finishing the research paper and learning a lot, it was published in a Q1, highest rank of journals, AMBS 3-star. So it is a simple paper, yes, but that's why I say the most simple papers are the most beautiful papers. Yeah, and that goes for the methodology, the data collection, the writing of your paper, okay? Don't overcomplicate the writing. So keep it simple. And that's even with the wording. Try to simplify the wording of your themes. Write up your results. So finally, we are at step 6, which is the write up. So notice between step 1 and step 6, it's a very iterative process. You're kind of back and forth, all right? And that's normal. It's very time consuming for qualitative data. But here you are now writing up your results. When you're writing your results, you should use a very unbiased, or to at least the best that you can, and neutral voice when you're doing your write-up. You are interpreting your raw data, yes, but you need to convince your reader now. So an element of creativity does need to come out in terms of persuading your reader that the findings that you find are the findings that you found in the raw data, all right? So here you will write your findings, which is to a certain extent an interpretation of the results, but then depending on what your supervisor wants, you will have also a discussion chapter. Okay, sometimes some supervisors like a results and discussion linked together, some prefer that separate. If you have it, nonetheless, whenever it comes to your discussion chapter, what are you doing here? You're interpreting your results in light of the literature. So are your findings similar to the previous studies? Are they very different? How and why? Okay, so you should be linking your results to the literature. I've got a short clip here. Please tell me if you can see it. Hopefully. Can you hear it?
No, it doesn't play.
It doesn't play?
No.
Okay, I don't know why it does that sometimes. It's okay. I will send these slides to Martin, and you can play the YouTube in your time. So overall, that is the end of today's session. And so hopefully you'll be able to define what is qualitative data analysis, what are the six steps required for data analysis, and you'll be able to start to understand how to actually code and categorize. Okay, and we also learned that triangulation is particularly helpful for researcher bias, okay, when we're trying to reduce researcher bias. We also understand that data saturation is important to be reached to be able to have conclusive findings. And that is all for today's session. Do you have any questions?
One question, Doctor.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. As part of the research, there's something called transferability, like applicability of findings to other contexts. Is this a requirement in qualitative research, or is it something it is expected by some universities, or it is a general practice that your context must be transferable?
I hopefully I understand your question. So, is your question you're asking in qualitative research, one of the limitations is that your findings are not transferable? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
even I'm talking about. See, basically, there will be analytical transferability. So, whatever research is done analytically, it can be applied to other contexts as well, but it cannot be applied exactly. I mean, 100%.
Mm, no,
So, yeah.
so take that with a pinch of salt. Okay, one of the main limitations of qualitative in general is that it's very, when you're in research in general, we are analyzing something very specific. Okay, now if I'm trying to understand the adoption of electric vehicles in the UK, why do people buy electric vehicles in the UK? Yes, and I do it in a qualitative way. Yes, to a certain degree, my findings are transferable to Europe, yeah, or other similar contexts. So yes, my findings, my results can have an impact for policymakers, for example, in France, in Germany, countries of a similar background, infrastructure. Now, with that said, you have to be careful because, I've studied specifically a particular sample in the UK. It might even just be a particular geographical location. It might be just London. London, we cannot compare to, Nice in France. So we have to be very careful about the applicability and how we say it. Is it possible? Yes, to a certain extent, yes. But be cautious in terms of how you frame that. But generally speaking, when you're selling your research, you should sell your research that, okay, I study the adoption of electric vehicles and my findings are helpful for governments in other countries. So yes, I do agree, and that's a very good point. But you should also have some caution to that. Does that help you?
Yeah, I mean, what I understood is most universities and examiners, they expect qualitative studies to discuss transferability as part of the methodological rigor. But I do not have to prove that my findings apply everywhere. Rather, if I can provide contextual detail to the
Yeah.
readers, and they can judge whether the findings may be relevant to them or not. It is something
Yeah.
based on the context.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can do that. With any research, it's not applicable to absolutely everything. So there will always be limitations to every research. So you can just write that. The findings are applicable to other contexts. However, it should be taken into account that it's a different geographical location. The time, perhaps there was a certain time period that was data collection. So yeah, you can do that.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Any further questions before we wrap up?
I just had a quick question, Professor, for you. So, you mentioned about the various forms of sample, like the convenience sampling, the snowball sampling. So, I just wanted to check: can two methods be combined? Like, for example, uh, see, I was doing a research for my study wherein snowball sampling was important because I had to reach to that kind of people and it was through network. But at the same time, now when you were talking, I also realized maybe it was also the convenience thing. Like at least people that I knew, I could connect at their own time and I could speak about. So I'm not sure whether we can say a combination of two or it has to be like one kind of a thing.
Technically, yes. I've never read anything that can limit your sampling methodology as long as you've got a good justification and reference. When you justify anything that we do in our research, we need to be able to justify that with logic, but also with reference. Okay, ideally. Now, when I say reference, I don't mean to reference. Is it allowed? Yes, you are allowed to use two sampling techniques at once, but also don't overcomplicate your research. If you are actually using two and you can justify that and have an appropriate reference as to why you actually feel convenient sampling is appropriate for your research, and same for snowballing, then that's fine because that's actually what you did. But do double check, is that actually what you did, or is it more just all convenient sampling, or is it all just more snowballing sampling? I come back to try to keep your paper simple, but if it is what you if you believe that this is what you did and you've got a good justification as to why you've done that and you can link that again to literature, then that's fine. But I would say never more than two. It will start
Okay.
to become very, very, very messy and
Okay.
confusing.
Okay. Okay. That sounds. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Okay, anything else before we finish?
Um, Dr. Laila, this is Yunus. Actually, this is not a question. I just want to congratulate you for your wonderful presentation. I just want
No,
to,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. I just want to share with you. I'm doing DBA right now and have been in the market for almost 30 years. So what I'm doing right now, I have the problem that I feel that my research is too simple. Well, I can substantiate with all the supportings and all the requirements of research of DBA, but I really appreciate that your remark that sometimes it is simple, but
Most
it's
welcome.
something that
Absolutely. I will show you. I'll share my Google Scholar now. The particular paper that I was a PhD student as well at the time, and I managed to publish it while still in my degree. So although it definitely took some time and hard work, I I still managed to publish during the PhD. And like I said, it's a very simple paper, but I'll put my Google Scholar here. It's the GDP paper. Okay, that GDP paper, you can have a look at. It's a very simple paper in terms of what I'm doing. But if you look at the result, I had a huge impact on policy. It was in a very high quality journal. So, overall, that's why I always tell my students, don't overcomplicate it, keep it simple, think about perhaps in my research, mine was just an independent, a dependent, and a moderator. You can have a look at this is quantitative, not qualitative, but you get the idea. It's a very simple paper. And of course, you can feel free to, reach out anytime if you have any questions.
Another question, Dr. Laila. I think I have a good research, good research questions, this and that, and I think by the end of my research, will solve a lot of problems and it's transferable. Okay, but the only thing is that there's so many theories that I have to be able to answer such that your 6 steps just now, your research, thematic, abductive, inductive, all these things. So sometimes this thing really worries me because, when the examiner asks me, questions like that, where I have to memorize every single theories and,
It's okay. Which
yeah,
year are you in? Which year of the
uh,
DBA are you in?
I am finishing my research proposal. I'm going to defend it very soon. So
Okay, but proposal is still early stages. Okay,
yeah.
so do not. By the way, what you're feeling is completely normal for a doctorate student.
Yeah.
I have doctorate students. I feel like part of my job is just to calm them down. Okay,
Yeah.
so and I remember from my own experience, it's very overwhelming, very overwhelming. Okay,
Yeah.
but that's actually on reflection is a positive thing. Why? You should not, as a DBA student, be calm and not worried about your process and your experience during the DBA. There's so much to learn, so much to do, and that's normal. So the feeling of being overwhelmed is a completely normal feeling, by the way. Okay? If you're not feeling overwhelmed, it means you're not doing enough. So I'd be concerned because the more you read, the more you know, the more you want to do. But then you have to scale it back. Okay? What is it that I'm doing? What is it that I need to do to graduate? Anyhow, you as you progress through your doctorate degree, by the time that you get to the end, I'm not going to say that that feeling will 100% go away. It will not really ever go away, but you do get more comfortable with it and it will get easier. Okay? My only thing I can say, now I was in a kind of a good position because I managed to publish, I did a 3-paper format thesis. So 2 of the 3 had been published, but it's kind of, even if you don't publish, it's fine because the story is still relevant. It just maybe gave me a touch more confidence. So because I had gone through all these rounds of publication and reviewer comments, by the time that I came to preparation for my Viva, I was preparing or trying to prepare, and I was reading and reading and reading my thesis, coming up with questions that the examiner might ask me. And then after day 1 of preparing for my Viva, I thought, what am I worried about? I spent 4 years and I know my research very well. Like I've read everything, I've done everything. At this point, I cannot do anything more. I've put my heart and soul into it. So I remember I prepared, I maybe spent a day or 2, preparing for some questions, but then I realized I know my research very well. I spent 4 years doing my research. I'm confident that any question that comes, I think I can answer it. And I tell you the same thing, okay? When you come to your DBA exam, of course you're going to be nervous. That's normal, okay? Of course you should prepare, yes. But remember, you've done your research, right? You've gone through all that experience. You learn all of those things. You still have a bit of time before you go to your exam. And in that time between now your proposal and actual submission, you're going to learn so much. Okay, so keep on learning, keep on reading. The reading never stops. Okay, when it comes to feedback from examiners throughout now, and maybe you might submit your paper just to get feedback, even if it's not published. You get feedback. That feedback helps. Go to conferences. The feedback helps. Yeah. So all of this experience accumulated over time will make you more confident. But it's completely normal that you feel this way now. And your supervisor, by the time that you go to your exam, the supervisor will hopefully, hopefully a good supervisor will prepare their student for exams. Mock Viva, they call it, so they will help you with these things. But it's good. It's a good thing that you're nervous because it means you care and you'll be fine, and you will feel a little bit more confident over time.
I just want to
Okay.
add one thing,
Yeah.
Dr. Laila. I actually went through this recently. I defended my proposal successfully. The
Oh,
thing I learned
mashallah,
is,
well
yeah,
done.
yeah. I'm going to the
Congratulations.
next. Thank you. Next stage now. The thing I learned
Mm-hmm.
is, as you said, I can actually reflect on what you said. That initially, when I
Mm.
was preparing for the defense, I prepared a lot, and then I felt like actually I know my research. I can answer any
Yeah.
question. Yes, I'm a human being. I can be wrong, right? I can take suggestions. So that approach came into me. But the best part of my preparation was, yes, I can defend, I can answer, but how I can defend and what would be my approach in answering as a DBA researcher. I
Yeah,
mean, there could,
yeah, absolutely.
that level,
Fantastic.
that level actually I achieved. Like, okay, I have an answer, but as a DBA, is this my answer? Because this is going to change my perspective, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point because
Yeah,
you're still at a bit of a junior stage with your proposal, okay? You're still early stages. Here, a lot of the foundations of your work can still tweak and change and add and edit and so on. So, when it comes to your defense, if they bring up things like, oh, why have you not considered this? Why have you not considered that? Blah, 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 blah. You can just say, if you have considered it, say that, okay? Be very, confidence is key.
exactly,
Confidence
exactly.
is key. That's what I would say, okay? Do not give that you don't know or you're shaky with your answers or something like that, okay? Be confident in your answers. If you do know the answer and you've read something, then say that, okay? If they bring up something that you haven't considered, so you can say, that's a very interesting point. I haven't
Exactly. Yeah.
considered that, but actually, now that you've mentioned it, that could potentially work very well, and I will consider that. Okay, that's normal. That's okay. That's good. That's a good thing. Okay, take this as a learning experience. This is not the be all end all of your degree. Okay, so your defense is just to move you to the next stage. So it's good to have be a bit worried because it means that you care about your research and everything, but you'll be fine. Just be confident in what you do, and of course do prepare to the best of your ability, but try not to over panic too much. But as long as you've done your work, you've put in the effort, you've tried to read widely, okay, read the examiner's work. This is very important. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, thank you very much, people. We have run over for a fair bit, so we will stop at this point. Thank you very much, Layla.
Yeah.
That was very interesting, particularly the bit about coding, because I never understood coding. So that's really great.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone,
Wonderful.
and hopefully we will
Thank
see
you very
you in
much.
July as well.
Thank you very much. Take care. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, one and all. Bye.